Do More is a call to action for all Australians to be allies, making the commitment to become more informed, more educated, and more engaged in creating positive change to challenge racism. This conversation series seeks to make change through storytelling. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community, and what we learn through storytelling culture of the longest continuous civilization on the planet. We pay our respect to elders, past and present.
I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands upon where we're gathering and we're meeting and having conversations here today, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, acknowledging this land always has been and always will be Indigenous land. My name is Tasneem Chopra, and I'm really excited today to be speaking to Rana Hussain. Now, those of you who've been watching the DoMore series might be aware of her work, and she has been instrumental in so many of the learnings and insights that have been shared via interviewed participants over the last 12 months. So her role has been really pivotal to this project, and this is our chance to shine a spotlight on the work that she's been doing, both in this space but also within the sporting arena at large, because she's quite a gun when it comes to making an impact on the diversity and inclusion space, on talking anti-racism and having the tough conversations that nobody wants to have, but we really need to address in this space. So, Rana, welcome. So good to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's very strange being on this side of the fence of it now.
Good, exactly. You can put away your clipboard and you can just receive at this point. Your involvement with DoMore, it's been about 12 months. In that time, you've probably come across a number of people and a lot of sporting talent and people even aligned to the sporting industry. Can you share with me, like, what have been some of the key insights, things that surprised you and things that shocked you, or things that maybe even disappointed you about how grim the situation is? So I guess the good and the bad, what have you picked up?
Yeah, I was really lucky to help curate this series and sort of be a fly on the wall when people like yourself and Shelley Ware and Lisa Mariano have interviewed some really amazing people and people of colour and asked them about their thoughts on racism. And what has surprised me is how far we do have to go still, and how much everybody across the board talked about we're at the beginning of this. And I don't know, I thought maybe we were a little bit further along, and maybe we are, but the perception is that we're still at the beginning of this. And that really surprised me. And I think what everybody seemed to talk about is that it's not the overt racism. Nobody seems to be experiencing hate speech every day, or something that you can point at and say, that's racism. Everybody talked about this thing, this phenomena that is hard to explain and hard to grapple with and kind of goes under the radar and the sneaky stuff. And what I saw was people really struggle to explain it. And when I thought about sitting down and having this conversation with you today, having crafted questions for those people, and then I thought, okay, how will I answer these questions? I thought, yeah, this is really hard to explain. There's not a lot that you can point to that's clearly racist or clearly racism.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
feel it, and something that people talked about as a feeling that they experienced.
There was, I think, an expression that comes to mind was Sabrina when she said the long-term effect and impact of experiencing the racism that you can't see but you can feel is, she called it death by 1,000 cuts.
Totally.
And I thought that's such an apt description, because it really, explains exactly what you're saying, and I'm hearing it back.
Morgan Mitchell spoke really beautifully about walking into spaces where she might be the only person of colour, and the feeling that she has when she does, and they're often, really bougie places or fancy events, and people look at her like, what are you doing here? You don't belong here. Oh, who brought you in here? That feeling of, I think it's like, do I have something on my face people are looking and it's palpable, but you can't really pinpoint why it is. You've got that gut feeling that, okay, it's because people don't think I belong here. Nana Hussain spoke really beautifully about feeling the frustration of not being able to just walk into a Kmart or a convenience store and pick up some makeup where her lighter skinned peers could, and that might seem like a really simple thing, and is that really a big deal? But her point was, but everybody else moves through the world with such ease because the world is set up for them. But because I have dark skin, it's not set up for me. So even small tasks that you think are menial have extra effort and require extra money because brands aren't stocking, her skin color or foundation. And, that really spoke to me. Benjamin Law broke it down beautifully around racism operates in different spheres. So there's the, individual to individual, but then there's the systemic and the structural. And, all of those conversations have really stayed with me.
And when you've had these stories, when you've heard these stories, they're sort of heard in the context of conversations and people telling you what they've been through. It's very experiential and very anecdotal. And that is storytelling. And I guess I'm asking you now, why do you think storytelling as a vehicle has been so powerful?
Well, you said it's experiential. We can talk statistics and sometimes a well-placed stat is really powerful, but when you walk in someone else's shoes and really understand what they're going through and can empathize with it or really get the visceral feeling of it, it's so much more powerful and impactful, if you witness something. And I guess that's what it is, maybe. It's being able to bear witness to something that's happening and really honour and understand that this is actually going on and acknowledge it. So while part of it is the empathy piece, the other part of it is it's powerful for the storyteller to be heard. And I think that that's also part of what we forget when we talk about racism. We think about, truth telling, and I think First Nations people have that really strong concept of truth telling. And part of that process is that for the storyteller, part of healing is to be heard as well. And I think that's the other reason why storytelling is so important.
Wow. And you're speaking, we talk about experiential and anecdotes. How has racism shown up in your life? Have you experienced it or have you witnessed it even as a bystander? Obviously, just give me some examples that you think are pertinent to what you're saying.
I've definitely experienced it.
Yeah.
It's like I said, it's so hard to explain the moments when you do, and they range. So, I've had hate speech directed at me. I've had, the post 9/11, there was a spike in it. I can very clearly remember being called a terrorist. I can very clearly remember people, even well-meaning people, question my faith and feel like because I was a visible Muslim, they could enter into conversations with me about the validity of what I believed or wearing a hijab. And, while I open dialogue and welcome dialogue, not always are those conversations respectful and coming from a respectful place. I've had, instances even recently of I was at the supermarket and standing in the aisle, and I was in somebody's way and I didn't realise, and I had my headphones on. That was rude. I probably should have been more aware of my surroundings. But the woman in whose way I was turned to her daughter and rolled her eyes and said, "Oh, typical." And I thought, oh, typical of what and who? And have I now, in her mind, cemented some stereotype of people who look like me? I just reeled from that. So there's things like that. There's the daily kind of microaggressions, I guess we're calling them. But the thing that's probably had the most impact on me is a sense of not belonging. a sense of being on the outer of society, of not feeling like that being an Australian is who I am, and that the national kind of pastimes, whether it be sport or art or culture, they're not for me. I'm not part of that conversation. And that over time, call it racism, call it something else, but that over time has really had an effect on me and an impact on me. You know, to the point where I look at my life now and I've devoted it to belonging and inclusion in sport, which is to me the national language, because I want people to feel like they can, and I can see what that would do for a young Rana if I felt that way growing up.
Well, speaking of growing up, I mean, you were born here, right?
Yes, I was
born here. And do you feel like the racism has just escalated as you've grown older, or have you just become more aware of it and are able to articulate how you feel?
Such a good question. I wonder that myself, to be honest. I think it's probably, I think both things are happening. I think I became much more aware of what was going on, and that there was definitely some really racist things happening throughout my childhood globally, but also very locally. And I just didn't realise what that meant or looked like, and I didn't have the language to talk about it. But I think even in the last sort of 10 years or 5 years even, there's been, I think we have made way, and we've seen global movements really kind of become part of mainstream conversation, and we're seeing a bit of the backlash of that. And that means we also then get a backlash of racism and fear, and people who are nervous about what cultural change means for them, who are maybe sitting on the other side of the fence. And so now I feel
what do you think? I mean, what do you think people are scared of? Are they scared of giving up their space? Are they scared of being called out?
I would love to sit down and ask them, to be honest, because I don't know. I don't know what is scary about the tide turning here, but there's a palpable sense of fear to me that is kind of turning up, and we see it in political conversations as well around the world and political movements. I can imagine it's scary that when we say this has been our experience and our voices come together collectively, that can be a scary thing for people. And I suppose my aim is to keep that conversation going, but be very clear that this isn't about taking anything away from people or just flipping the script. This is about making it better for all of us, and that there's stuff that we all get out of addressing these issues.
And that's what you do. I mean, you center yourself in issues that are really topical, but also requiring a lot of interrogation and review, I think, from community who perhaps don't feel confident to be able to discuss them, but you're actually going there. And then that leads me to, I guess, the next question, which is, you've done and continue to do a fair bit of work in the space of the AFL and now Cricket Australia as their new diversity and inclusion, is it manager, officer?
Yeah.
So, like, what's a nice Muslim girl like you doing in this cricket, in this football business? Like, how did this happen? Do your parents know what's happening?
Oh God, my family, when I told them that I before I started working at the football club, I was working at an Islamic school as a school counsellor. So they were really thrilled with that for me. And then I turned up one day and said, actually, I'm going to go work at an AFL club. And they
know what that was?
They knew what it was. Okay. And they thought that I was going to go and work, like, I don't know what they thought. I think they pictured me like in the change rooms with a whole bunch of sweaty guys or something. I don't know. But they kind of were like, what? Why? Why are you going to do that? And yeah, but to this day, they've understood a bit better, but there's still questions around we don't really get what you're doing, but we're pretty proud that you're in there and you're standing side by side with these people. But, you know, that's my parents who are the migrant generation who came over, who, as much as they try, don't fully know what it's like to be born here, to sound like every other Australian, and then to...
And do you think that comes from this sort of... and it's, you can't, I know I can't make a blanket assumption for migrants in general, but I think for certain communities, when they come here, they're all about settling down, working hard and making a life. Diversity and inclusion aren't even concepts, A, that are existing in certain languages, let alone existing in the mindset of a community that's settling in. And so here you are moving into the D&I space, and they're like, what's D, what's I, what's this? You know, it is, and I'm saying this with some experience, it can be a challenge to get that across to you. But then I've got to ask you, right, why football? Why cricket? What made you make the shift from school counsellor to Dna practitioner in these spaces?
And the counselling sort of led me there a little bit, in that I could see these young kids, and these were kids who were very firmly centred in their communities, their cultural groups, and they were very comfortable with that, and that was great. And their journey out into the broader society was through sport. That was how they were connecting with the rest of Australia. So they might have been Lebanese in their community, connected to their family and their culture, and they felt like they belonged there. But when they ventured out, it was through sport, and they didn't see themselves there. And I could just see that if we could just bridge that gap a little bit more, if we could just connect these two things via sport, because that seems to be where these two things are interacting, it would be so powerful. And then it was also from my own experience and my own childhood growing up here, seeing how big and powerful a thing sport is here. I mean, like I said, it's the national language to me. They are our heroes. They run things behind the scenes. The politics and business behind sport is massive in this country. And I just thought, if we could tap into that, if we could just insert ourselves in there and become meaningful players there, then what would that mean, and what would filter down out of that? And I've just sort of been in pursuit of that my whole life, really.
And do you feel like in the time that you were with AFL, and I guess with your ambition now with Cricket Australia, do you feel like you're, excuse the pun, making runs in that space? Are you getting the score on the board that you want?
I hope so. And I guess that the answer to that is with the communities that I hope to work for and represent. But I actually had a great conversation with someone today and I was saying, look, there are days where I'm not sure what impact I'm having. And she just reminded me that being there is actually already doing things.
Exactly. So apparently when you got this role, I understand #Rana was trending. Okay. So that's now a thing. And I want to ask you, why does representation matter?
You and I probably say this sentence more than we say anything else, which is, you can't be what you can't see.
Yeah.
So, it took me, I almost remember the day when I had the light bulb moment that, I could maybe go and work in sport. Like, I could do that. I was well into adulthood when it clicked that there's not a locked door at the front of AFL House and says only this type of person can get in here. Actually, no, I can, if I set my mind to it. I've got a good skill set. I've got, a brain. If I want to do that, I probably could do that. So let me try. And it was remarkable how quickly those things happened when I understood that, no, I can be there too. And once I was in there and continue to be in there, I see people coming to me and saying, how did you do that? How did you get in there? Because I want to get in there too. Women who look like me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Others who don't but feel on the outer of it, desperate to know, how did you make it in there? And that tells me that just being there is doing something.
You're basically living that role of being an ally then for those who are looking for a role model to emulate, and giving them, I guess, hope that, I can do that too. But by the same token, have you experienced the benefits of allyship in what you've done? And like, you don't have to name them, but like, have you met them? Have you been influenced by them? And do you find that it's changed your experience?
Absolutely. I talk about it with people as throwing the ladder down, and I've had many experiences where other women have brought me along with them, or tapped me on the shoulder and said, here's an opportunity that you should go for, or let someone else know, I know this person, Rana, she could probably do this thing. So those moments have been really powerful for me in building my own sense of self and confidence, but having someone who is ahead of me turn around and bring me along with them. And that's sort of what I think we need at the moment when it comes to racial equality, that there are people like us, people of colour, who are there who can turn around and bring more along with us. There are also people who aren't of colour who could be doing that. And
how can they do it better?
It's at every step of the way. I mean, my golden rule at the moment is, because it's an easy win, is if you're creating something new, if you're putting a panel on, if you've got a new job, if you're creating a new product, if you're having a meeting, bring someone with you, bring a person of colour with you, look in your networks to see who could be valuable in this conversation, who could use the experience, who might get something out of this, and just open that door for them. It's small stuff like that. We all know that the world sort of runs on who you know, and when you're in the right place at the right time, or being given an opportunity. So the more you can just bring people, kind of slowly drag people into what you're doing, the better. And it might be, hey, this person who's promising, come and shadow me and just be in the room with me, and then, give them a platform to say what they want to say. I think it's just opening ourselves up a little bit. And then, I think from an organisational point of view, formalise those processes. So how can we open our organisation up a little bit better to create roles, to be creative in getting different voices and experience in. And, we do it in sport all the time, an internship, a traineeship.
And that's a proactive way of, I guess, responding to how to promote talent and how to promote diversity. But what are, I guess the flip side of that, what are some of the existing structures that embed racism and that sort of unwittingly or maybe purposely, ensure there's a marginalisation of communities that you've noticed that need to be challenged?
Oh, God. I mean, our institutions are built on preferencing white Australians. I mean, that's the bottom line. We see it in all our power structures. We see it in our leadership. We see it in our media. So, I mean...
But then you're going to have someone say, yeah, sure, Rana, but look, Nick Kyrgios is playing for Australian tennis, and we've got some Sudanese Australians, and we've got some, Lebanese Australians playing. What's the problem? They're out there.
I would only just point to, my example is often in sport. I'll stay in my lane. In sport, we see athletes on the field representing different cultures and community. Yet when we pull the curtain back, we don't see them in the administration of the game or the league itself. The people who are the gatekeepers of all of that, we don't see those same, cultures and communities represented appropriately there. And so I think I'll fist pump the air when I see that on-field representation replicated internally in our structures and our systems. I would love to see that in sport. I mean, that's kind of the aim, really.
And based on that, what gives you hope in this space? Where can you see that curtain lifting and the optics changing?
I think Shelley Ware actually spoke about this when it was her turn on this couch, that Black Lives Matter and Me Too are two global movements that have really become a conversation that we all are comfortable to have to varying degrees, but it's really shifted the dial in terms of expectations now of organisations in particular. And so my hope is in the fact that we have these conversations and that people know what Me Too means, people know what BLM means, and that there is a bar now set. I think the challenge now is to turn that into action and real action, and not leave it at a conversation and do more, which is what we're here to talk about, right? I think that's what this project was all about, is that it was birthed out of the global BLM movement, but to make sure that it's not just a flash in the pan kind of concept, that we actually take it upon ourselves to do something and really act. And for me, I've been mulling over this concept for so long now. In my work and professional life, I think what we can do more of is set targets to have people of colour and different types of people represented in our organisations.
And I think you mentioned at the start of the interview that when you'd spoken to some people about, do you think this, how do you feel about the climate now and the conversations that we're having? And people are saying, oh, it's. I feel like it's beginning. It's finally starting. And you'd hoped it had been more than that. But I'm just wondering now. Reflecting on what you're saying, perhaps the BLM movement was so powerful. Maybe the George Floyd incident and what that, the momentum that triggered from that event has been the reason that it hasn't gone away yet. The fact that we are still having this conversation 12 months later or more even after that event. And the momentum has been sustained. And as we know, increasingly sporting arenas across the country are embracing diversity and inclusion like they haven't done before. There's clearly something in the water here because everyone's getting on board with it. How do you anticipate we can sustain that momentum all the way here in Australia when BLM was obviously in the US, but racism is still very much a part of the Australian sporting experience here? How do we sustain the momentum of making change?
Yeah, it's a really good point and it's a good question. And I do want to, flag that I think we sometimes do conflate Black Lives Matter and the broader concept of racism together. They are very separate things. One's a broader framework and one is a movement within that. I think we have to be really careful. And I'm one of those people that would love to just rip the system apart and get in there and get messy. But I think what I've come to realise is that we need to think about how we do this sustainably, how we do this so that it becomes business as usual and that it is baked into what we do, into our organisations, into our mindset, that Australia is a culturally diverse place. It was Black, it was colonised, that we have had waves of migrants ever since, and that we are just a tapestry of different cultures. And I think the sooner we, from a national identity point of view, come to terms with that and really bake that into our psyche, the better, because then when we see boards full of white men or full of white women or really underrepresenting the cultural diversity of our country, we will think that that's odd, because we'll know actually we are a diverse country. And so we will then call for that more and more.
I was going to say, and then we can do better, because that would be, and we can do more and we can do better, absolutely. Look, Rana, it's been such a joy to speak to you and just get a grasp of where you were to where you're at and everything in between. I know you have a young daughter at home. Does she have any personal ambition on the sporting field?
Oh, God, no. I wish she did. I've been pushing her into sport since she was born, and she's probably more a dancer, I have to admit. But I will say, you know, we had a really beautiful experience with her last summer and cricket. We took her along to the, you know, the little kids cricket program at the local club, and it was beautiful. There was a female coach. There was a really culturally diverse cohort that she came to play with. And the thing that really struck me was this person was not a person of colour, but the coach, she learnt all the children's names. She learnt how to pronounce them. She made sure she catered for our religious and cultural dietary needs. These are really basic things that are not hard to do, and she made the effort to do them. And I went in really terrified, wondering what that experience would be like for us and expecting to be on the outer. And what I found was the most amazing, warm, inviting space. And I just went, oh, yeah, I'm in the right business. But also this is what this can do, that it not only gave my daughter a space to engage and feel like she belonged, it made me feel proud of who I am, of being, you know, a multi-identity Australian, and that I finally got that experience of belonging that I probably had missed out on as a child. So it's so powerful, and I'm just glad that she gets to have that side of this as well.
That's such a beautiful affirmation, isn't it? It's an affirmation of why you do the work that you do, and to see it come back and sort of embrace you in a most unexpected way. It's a wonderful thing. So I'm so happy for you, and thank you for your time. It's been such a joy to listen to you. All the best with Cricket Australia. I think they're so lucky to have you on board. And yeah, look, please keep up the amazing work, and hopefully we'll chat soon again.
Find ways you can do more at domoreproject.com.au.